Welcome to yet another edition of Inequality Chronicles. I'm Dana Crawford. We'll proceed. Tonight's stories: The Ladder That Leads Nowhere, Divisive Diversity, Minimum Movement, and Famished Feeders. Story number 1. The Ladder That Leads Nowhere. Excuse me. The article's title: U.S. economy looks better, so why do we worry? Sources CNBC. The author is Everett Rosenfeld. The date of its publishing was July 24th. And the bullet points are as follows. The American people are gradually building more confidence in the economy. J.P. Morgan's leading economist, Michael Feroli, recently remarked that the job creation is doing as well as one could hope. His counterpart at Wells Fargo, is concerned about the number of people working part-time who would like to find more meaningful work. People making less than $45,000 annually are less liberal with their discretionary spending. So brief comments about this article. First of all, let me just say I'm sorry for a little bit of a absence here, and it's only been about like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks since last episode, and I know I said that these would be once every week or every other week, but I wanted to try and keep them to as close to weekly as possible. But so yeah, I set this episode up a little over a week ago, but as you'll find out later in my closing statements, it's been quite the eventful past few weeks. But in this story here, getting back to one we're talking about here, there's some things I have to point out, like the first bullet point, saying that the American people are starting to become more confident in our economy. It's because we're starting to see some things improve, but comments like from the leading economist of J.P. Morgan saying that the economy is doing as well as what one could hope. It's not doing as well as it should, as it has the potential to. We're just not investing the resources in an appropriate fashion, and that's sort of what you find when you look at the heart of this person's counterpart at Wells Fargo, when he said that people would like to find more meaningful work. And in the last remark saying that people are less able to spend their money when they're making less than $45,000 a year. But those jobs, as we've covered before, are what are becoming more available now. It's what you're seeing pop up all over the country, especially with my generation, the millennials. So this claim that we're doing as well as what we could hope. If this is the best that we could hope for, then we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, quite frankly, this isn't going to be much of a recovery if the recovery that we've had is just the best that we can do now. It's just not. Because if this is the best that we have, then the next crash that comes, whenever it comes, will leave us in far worse condition. I mean, how much more down the rabbit hole do we need to go before we wake up and realize that we're doing it wrong right now? History needs to play a part in how we proceed. Story number 2. Divisive Diversity. The article's titled: Women and people of color get punished for hiring to increase diversity. White men get rewarded. The source is Think Progress. The author is Bryce Covert, and the date of its publishing was July 23rd. The bullet points. A study by the University of Colorado found that executive women and minorities who attempt to increase diversity are punished in one way or another, while white men who do so get rewarded. Part of this is the perception, which holds that women and minorities are somehow less competent in handling diversity. As a consequence, it disproves the notion that an increase in any form of diversity does not pave the way for more diversity. Excuse me. These hurdles to making society more equal are being experienced throughout the industrialized world. Alright. I think I misworded the third bullet point there. I think I meant to say it disproves the notion that an increase in any form of diversity paves the way for more diversity instead of does not. But reality is, there was nothing saying that having more diversity opens the door for even more so, that it basically replicates itself, because it hasn't. Especially when you have diversity at the top. I mean, it has a good image, but there has to be something underneath it. And we have this culture in the business world, seemingly, where, as you hear, women and minorities who are executives are somehow seen as being biased, or, less able to consider the consequences of their actions when they try to promote more diversity in their workforce. But men are somehow seen as, white men are somehow seen as more, out to do what's best for everyone. This is something that we need to unwind, and it's obviously a matter of education for the most part. Unteaching ourselves these stereotypes, both about women and minorities. And but if we really want true diversity, we have to let people be able to have this even playing field where they can all expect to be able to rise to the top and have an equal chance at doing so. But first, there needs to be some, for lack of a better expression, affirmative action to put qualified people of diverse backgrounds, from both genders, all races, all ethnicities, up in certain positions, and then give them the free rein to use their skills without second guessing their every move. Do we second guess every move of white men who are in those positions of power? I don't think we do. And for all of my misgivings about his tenure in office right now, with respect to some things that he's done, I think this country has a bad habit right now of second guessing everything that our current black president decides, when we weren't exactly second guessing everything that all of his predecessors were, at least nowhere near on the same level. I'm not saying that you shouldn't dissent, but what I am saying is that it's just ingrained in us, and we have to unlearn it if we really want to progress. Story number 3. Minimum movement. The article's title: Minimum wage workers are getting left behind. The source is CBS News. The author is Elaine Schurter. I'm hoping I pronounced your name right. And the date of its publishing was July 24th. The bullet points. The proposed increase of the minimum wage of $10.10 is actually 24 cents less than what the wage was in 1968 when adjusted to 2012 dollars. Minimum wage workers have lost almost 6% of their purchasing power since the recession ended. If the minimum wage had kept pace with average productivity, it would now exceed $21. The states that recently increased their minimum wage have experienced stronger job growth than elsewhere in the country. A lot of this is self-explanatory. I've talked about it numerous times in the past, and I'll continue to keep talking about it. Much like from time to time I'll continue to talk about the homeless issue. And honestly, the point is, if we think $10.10 an hour is outrageous, or even $15 an hour is, unimaginable, just consider the stats there that if our minimum wage had kept pace with our productivity rates, from where it was back in the mid-late 1960s, we would have an official living wage right now at the very least for everyone at just over $21 an hour. Honestly, that's by all means, $10.10 an hour is more than a compromise. If anything, it's the working person ripping themselves off at, being willing to settle for that. I mean, when I made $10.30 an hour, that was the most I've ever made. When I made that briefly, I still had to have assistance. I mean, I was a temp and I only made that amount for a month, but at the same time, I was able to pay bills, but I still had to have help with food here and there. I've got 2 kids, so, it doesn't guarantee you'll get out of poverty. $15 an hour would be a lot closer to making sure people can provide for all of their needs. And if we really want this economy to get back up on its feet and start booming again, you got to give people the power, via their wallet. I know some people out there have this goofy theory that say, oh, well, if you want that, then just get rid of all the taxes or reduce taxes to near zero. Problem is that diverts resources. Yeah, it's an awesome idea to get rid of that, but then of course you're going to sacrifice other services that are essential. I mean, without our various taxes, how are you going to pay for like essential services at the federal level, state level, local level? I mean, yeah, granted there are alternatives, but then you're going to issues of fairness and how certain taxes affect certain groups of people disproportionately compared to others. Anyways, it's another discussion for another day. I just wanted to highlight on that this is part of the key of getting this economy back up to where it needs to be and dealing with inequality. Got to give people a chance to step up. Okay. Final story. Story number 4. Famished feeders. The article's title: Restaurant workers stay hungry as the food industry feasts on profit. The source is The Guardian. The author is Jenna Kasperkevic, and the date of its publishing was July 25th. The bullet points: about a third of those employed in the food industry are lacking nutritional food security. Some restaurants apparently try to compensate for such insecurity by offering meals comprised of disgusting leftovers to their workers. Working multiple jobs to make ends meet is a common feature of life working in the industry. A fifth of these workers receive assistance just to feed themselves. There's something to be ashamed about in this story. Something to be gravely ashamed about in this story. I think it was the previous episode where I mentioned the terrible issue that we have in this country of having 2 different forms of minimum wage. One for tip workers, one for non-tip workers. I mean, for restaurant workers to basically have to starve, sometimes going home with nothing for their hard work, for them to be forced to starve while they're feeding other people who from time to time just don't feel the need to tip them. I mean, what does it say about us? It's by all means, the tipping should be voluntary to a certain degree, but that shouldn't be the sole basis of your wages. If anything, that should just be a perk. These restaurants are basically getting away with having quasi-slave labor, and their way of making up for their workers having very little pay, very little to show for their hard work, is by feeding their employees what their wasteful customers don't want to eat. I mean, I don't know if that is a very appealing way to live life. knowing that a number of single mothers tend to be in the restaurant, tend to be tipped workers, I'm just ashamed to know that this is happening in our country. I mean, not just our country, but it's really disgusting. And it also just says something that a large portion of these workers have to get food stamps just to feed themselves. I mean, the terrible irony of working in a restaurant, but yet you are hungry at the end of the day when you go home. It's like being a doctor, working in a hospital, and at the end of the day you're not healthy. You're of miserable health. I mean, what does it say? It sends a terrible message, and I think every American should care a little bit more about this. To recap this very speedy episode, the economy's economic growth, though somewhat promising, has been constipated by the over-reliance on job creation and jobs paying at or near the minimum wage. Despite what one would normally think when contemplating potential perks to encouraging diversity in management, it has been studied and determined that a more diverse management makes it less likely that diversity will be promoted, because of the biased view that any non-white male executives are too cold or incompetent to properly handle such. Minimum wage paying jobs are worth less now than they were 46 years ago, and have lost their value even in the past 5 years that have elapsed since the last time the federal standard was raised. Our food workers are starving as they work hard, but they guaranteed minimum wage of less than $3 an hour to feed couples celebrating anniversaries and tourists who all too often forget or refuse to tip them. I'm going to provide an update now, because you all know that I'm part of a local 99% effort. Sorry, I got interrupted there. But you know that I've been involved in a local 99% effort to put a measure on the ballot pertaining to the Citizens United decision. And part of the reason why I've had a little bit of a delay in doing another episode was because we've been trying to brainstorm that react to the news that we got. Now, the last time I had an episode, I brought up that we had submitted our petitions, and on the August 1st edition of The Advocate, on page 3, under the title "Petitions Fall Short for November Ballot," Mr. Joe Williams, the article's author, notes that we were 110 signatures short. Rest assured, and I will update everyone over time, that we are far from finished with our effort. Because the issue of inequality isn't just about economics, it's about politics too. It's our political inequality. The inequality of the distribution of power is just as much important as the inequality in the distribution of wealth. They are very much intertwined. And to ignore either of these problems is to, well, condemn us to continue this pattern until it just blows up in our face. So, with that, and with thoughts in mind pertaining to the recent outbreak of deplorable activity, in the Midwest with respect to Ferguson, Missouri, and police brutality and all that. Sorry again. The fact is, we've allowed too much power to be put into few hands. We've allowed a police state to emerge in the absence of, well, popular sovereignty in practice. We still have a democracy. What's left of one. It's up to us to use it to correct the course that we've taken as a country. This goes to economics, politics, race relations, all of it. Because even the issue of what's going on in Ferguson and the issue of police brutality and the terrible disparity between, involving how African Americans and other minorities are disproportionately more likely to be arrested or even killed at the hands of authority figures than are, whites. All that has to do with inequality as well, and inequality of justice. And there's just things we have to care about, but in order for us to get a grip on this, we have to get control of our democracy. These things are complex, I realize. But as one, we the people united, we can rise up and we can conquer this. We can deal with Citizens United. We can deal with the issue of living wage, make our economy robust, and we can make society, the justice system, our politics work for all of us. Until next time, thank you.